Okay, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to our exclusive interview with a veteran commercial script supervisor, Celine Strilesky, currently in Toronto, Canada. Celine I think you've been around as long as I have because I've always been aware of you. I've always known about you. We worked in the same city for a bunch of our career. But I actually first met Celine I was at the beginning of lockdown. So I met her through Zoom, and thank God, you're so lovely and wonderful and live up to all the wonderful things I've ever heard about you. If you don't know, Celine started out in long form around the same time I did, and has done, very notable series in Canada, at least Degrassi Junior High, being Erica, and films like Bollywood and Hollywood. Oh, actually, we worked on the same show in the 90s called Traders, just at different times.
Yeah.
and feature films like Bollywood and Hollywood with Deepa Mehta and many, many others before turning to commercials, where she is known internationally for her work in commercials and has worked with some of the best directors in the world in that field. And you also have directed a documentary, and now you have a YouTube series that you've directed, Old Movies for Young People, starring Brad Fraser. Thank you so much, Celine. So I think we started at the same time. We've been around as long as each other in the early 90s. Is that correct?
Yes.
I've never asked you how you started out as a script supervisor in general.
I was in Montreal. I was doing a qualifying year for a master's in psychology. I ran out of money. I needed to get some work. I had a boyfriend who was working in the film industry, actually working as an artist on Alan Rudolph's movie, The Moderns, that took place in Old Montreal for Paris, and got a job in the art department doing research. What was unique, it was in Old Montreal, we were doing a story about a forger that Keith Carradine was playing, and David Stern, an actual master forger, was doing the forgeries. So we had a studio in Old Montreal, and all the actors would come. So Wally Shaw and Keith Carradine would come and hang out. And it was the very first film set that I'd really been on. So I had no idea what anything was. So when lunch came, I would sit with Alan Rudolph and all the cast. That made the best, that they were the most interesting table in the room. So I had that chutzpah that you have when you first start out. And so came to Toronto, called David Maltese, a art department guy, and said, "Hey, David, I want to work in the film industry. What should I do?" And he said, "Well, Celine, with your personality, you should be a script supervisor." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'll put the word out." And I said, "Okay." Then 2 weeks later, I got a call from Colin Brunton.
Oh, one of my friends.
He was doing a movie, and he said, "Hey, I hear you're looking for a film job. Do you want to come out to Aurelia and do the last 2 weeks on a show that the guy who owned Jet Fuel Cafe, he was doing craft. He left. Come Bill in." I said, "Okay," hung up, and then called David. "What's a craft service?" Like, no idea what I was getting myself into. So I did the job, and I was absolutely horrible as a craft service person. But what I was good at was making sure the script supervisor, Stephanie Russell, who's now working in Vancouver, got her gluten-free snacks.
Very important.
So she trained me on that film, on that very first film. Alan Rudolph's was just an introduction to the film set. I had no idea what was going on. So Stephanie Russell trained me on that very first movie, put me onto second unit. That ended up being pickup shots with the lead actor, Daniel Stern. So it wasn't second unit at all. And the entire crew helped me out. So I kind of fumbled through and went through that. And then from there, I called Kevin May and Doug Brodstein to see if I could shadow with them. Kevin May got back to me first. He was working on Degrassi. I went on to Degrassi, took over for him. And then from there, it went working low budget films, but working on commercials.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you were doing commercials the whole time?
Right from the beginning. So like in those very first days, that very first film that I did here, Crazy Horse, I don't even know if I have a credit for it. Actually, I do think I have a credit for it. But from there, I had a friend who is a production coordinator in commercials who said, hey, why don't you come to set and learn script supervision here on commercials? So I did. And on set was Daniela, like the veteran of script supervisors for commercials. And I saddled up next to her on an Apple box and observed her for one day and then started working in commercials.
Oh, wow.
The learning curve is big and it doesn't have to be. Somebody tells you what to do. So that's how I got into the industry.
Okay, so you had a pretty decent long form career going. So what was the tipping point for you to switch over to commercials?
I think the first turning point began when we went digital. The first shoot that we were shooting 3 digital Viper cameras, handheld, shoulder, following an ensemble cast, just this cluster part of activity, and me looking at my line script and at all the cameras and at the director and wondering how we were going to get everything and if I would be able to flag anything that was missed. We were shooting rehearsals. We would have sort of blocking, and because digital was cheap, we'd shoot the rehearsals, including the camera operator's feet for a lot of it. And so that was the starting point. I thought, this isn't fun anymore. But the actual turning point was I did a film in India with a director who I got along with really well. India was hectic. I had a month of prep. We shot for 2 months. It was a big, big show. But on the show, through all the things that we were doing in Bombay with elephants, an ensemble cast, 4 cameras, our director taking the 4th camera because he didn't like the operator, and just shooting, also sort of a run and gun style. But the director would bellow at me from across the street or wherever we were, hey, Celine, do we have it? And I would say, yeah, we have this, that here, let me. And I'd run to him and tell him what we'd do another take. And this was how we operated pretty much for the whole film. It was super hectic, but it was really a lot of fun. Then with that same director, the following year on a Disney film with the Jonas Brothers, shooting here in Toronto, Earl Bales Park, exterior night in November, song and dance, ensemble cast, 3 cameras. The camera crew was understaffed. The director was taking his own chair. I was dragging a monitor from place to place. And the director, like India, bellowed up, Celine, why is this harder than India? So that was really the turning point, that it wasn't fun anymore. I was cold and doing that line script at the end of the night and working 2 full weeks exterior night that I couldn't get out of it. You can't call sick. You can't do it. You just do it. And I thought, you know what? So let's talk. I don't want to do this anymore. That was my turning point. And I thought, I'm just going to stick it out and work in commercials. And it took about a year for commercial people to take me seriously, that I was here to stay, because I was always going in and out, or when they would call, are you on a show? And it would be a really sustainable filler, but a filler. So it took about a year before everybody knew that I was working in commercials full time. And then it was just a matter of choosing which jobs I wanted to work on, which directors I wanted to work with, and choosing the amount of days I wanted to work. So the turning point was 2 weeks exterior nights in the rain.
Wow. Well, I imagine that is a turning point for a lot of people. I know this might be a very long answer, and that's okay. This is like the crux of why we're here. But what do you see as the biggest difference in the role of the script supervisor in long form in TV versus commercials?
The biggest difference in long form, we prep. We break down the script. We go to rehearsals. We go to read-throughs. I talk to the director, the editor, even the actors. I know the script backwards and forwards. When I arrive on set, any department can come to me and ask a question, and I'll be able to give the answer in a second. In commercials, we don't have prep. We don't get paid for prep. The director, the agency, all the people involved, they've been prepping for 1, 2 weeks, 2 months. Sometimes the agency has been on an ad for an entire year working with the client. So everybody is everybody knows what's going on. I don't. I come to set on the shoot day. The PM staggers my call a half hour to an hour after crew call to save money. I arrive on set, hoping that the production coordinator arrives at a decent time. And I get handed, at least in the days of paperwork before COVID, that much paper. The AD saying, okay, get ready, first positions, we're ready to shoot. It was crazy. So I learned that I had to prep.
But yeah, let us know, how do you prep?
I'll just give you a broad stroke example because it's super involved with prep in commercials. First, so I do prep. I do break down the scripts the way that I do in long form. I look at the scripts, I look at the boards, I time out the script, I time out the boards. If there are multiple versions, I compare and contrast the versions to make sure everything matches up. Then I research the director. I'll look at their reel, anything I can find online about them. I'll ask production to give me their treatment. And I get the pre-production book. I'll ask for pre-visualizations. I ask, they don't give this. And then if I haven't worked with the director before, I'll ask around, like what's this person's disposition? So I learn everything that I can so that when I come to set, that I'm prepared with the material that we have. And even so, things change. The morning of prep, I touch base with the first AD to go over the day and the DP and the director and the agency. So I talk to everybody, including the producer, asking if they have anything flagged that I should watch. So my prep on the morning, if something happens that I don't get everything that I need on the morning, things change. I prep by going to all the departments and asking them to walk me through the day there. And I do ask for prep. If it's a 5-day shoot, I'll ask for 1-day prep. I'll explain to them why I need it. I ask if they are having any meetings with visual effects, and I ask to attend that meeting, and I get paid for that meeting. And so I do prep, and I encourage the script supervisors that I do talk to ask for prep as well. And I feel that if we standardize our practice in commercials, that we can all ask for prep, that they'll be used to it. So they're used to me, saying, I want to come in a call, I need this, that, and the other. And they don't always see what I do on set, but they see the end result, the director asking me back and not wanting to do something without me. So that is telling in my prep. We have to remember that if you don't ask, you don't get, right? Yeah. So you ask for absolutely everything. The worst that will happen is no. The worser that will happen is they won't ask you back. And you know what? We don't want to work with those people anyway, so fuck them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard I know there's really new people in the group. It's hard for them to see that, but in the long run, with hindsight, so true. Okay. So let's go deeper into the practice of commercial sets. I've done relatively few, but I do remember layers of politics, for one thing, that have to be navigated that I didn't sense as much in long form.
The politics, they're practices that in commercials, we have two groups of people. With the director is the production, which is us, the producer, the DP, and then the other group, which are the agency and the client and the agency producer. So there are two groups of people that are working what should be for the same end result, but there's always conflicts that arise, and there are often moments when we're directing by committee because the director has to answer to the agency who has to consult with the client. So there's lots to navigate through with that. So it's practices, it's learning who the director is, what their relationship is with the agency, what temperament the client is, how much knowledge the agency has, and we have to work within that. So the agency may say something or ask for something that we'll never need as a waste of time. We're not going to get our day, but we do need this. And so there's a diplomatic way of going in and suggesting that, you do things sort of like the director whisper, you suggest, you make it their idea, that you basically suggest very strongly what they should do. And then they usually do it.
but they still have to answer to everybody above them. So it's a big dance.
They do. So it's a political game trying to navigate between all the people. And that was the biggest learning curve for me. And I finally feel like I just cracked the code over the last 5 years, that I get it. And I know best how to work with all these people. And it's also a changing platform, because the agency where 15 years ago, there would be one agency director, usually a white old man, who's getting paid a lot of money, who's now replaced by 4 young people who are great and really creative and wonderful. But that's 4 people who have to consult with each other and then consult with the client. They want to get another job, so they do things for the client rather than that one person who would stand up and say, this isn't good. There's a really good documentary called Art and Copy that ran the festival circuit years ago, which addresses commercials. And even though that doc is probably 20 years old, it still shows everything that happens on a commercial set. I have a few other tidbits, but that's for another time. But Art and Copy is a doc that I highly recommend. It's very funny.
Oh, that's fantastic. And the thing I have memories of the agency producer being so powerful. I always worked with 2, English and French. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like in Canada, it's English and French, and in the States, it would be English and Spanish, about working bilingually.
I've done a few jobs. I've done jobs that were in English and Thai and Mandarin. And so I was able to do English and a little bit of Thai, or certainly get along well with the Thai agency to help the director. So this is part of the politics, is doing all that bullshit dancing stuff that you have to do. French, English. Yes, that's a topic. It's not French, it's Quebecois.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Joli. And the French spots that we double shoot are usually comedic, which then become really specific how that dialogue is given. So I can't call myself bilingual. I lived in Montreal, as has Mary Sylvester, one of our people. That to be bilingual is something really specific, that by the mere fact that I have a name Strilesky, I could never be bilingual. So here in commercials, I know enough to follow the script. I can cue dialogue, but when actors go into a repartee of comedic dialogue, then I rely on the French producer, who almost becomes the director on set, because often the director doesn't speak French. So the French producer comes in and does the job. Then I work with him or her very closely to ensure that they're getting what they want and are represented. So yes, the French English is, it's always a McGill, because it's 2 set of cast.
Did a commercial in Italian before, because they were looking for someone who could do editing notes in Italian. And that was so much fun, because it was a Milanese director coming to Toronto. So we got paid in our day rates by check, but we also got a giant wheel of cheese, because it was a cheese. I always tell the director whisperers, this is for long form and commercials, every language you speak and every citizenship you have, write it at the top of your resume, because it will get you jobs faster than anything. Because you do speak Thai, right?
I speak a bit of Thai, taxi Thai, they'd call it. And I studied Italian in Italy, in Siena, and at the university, so I can say a few impressive sentences in Italian.
Now, in terms of the actual director whispering on set, so in commercials, so what I remember about commercials is that every single frame was predetermined, that they almost never, at least on the ones I worked on, they never deviated from that. Whereas in long form, as you said, they're constantly relying on us to make sure that they have the story, that it's going to cut together. Let's talk about that side of the job, that aspect in commercials.
In long form, through the breakdown, I do my breakdown on the day. I make sure that the director and I are on the same page, that we have everything, and I act as a sieve. I make sure that they don't forget anything. Then on the day, I look at the schedule and I kind of throw it out the window. And then I work with the director to ensure the director is getting what they want and we're getting it in due time. The same with commercials, that I still whisper to the director. The more I know, the more I whisper, the better they like me and the better the day is, right? So I do prep, I do break everything down, and I make sure that I know it, and then I dispense of it. Now I know the story, I know what the boards say, but I think outside the box, and that's where the fun of it comes for me. And the trust with the director when, you know, I look at the boards and they've crossed the axis and I forgot this and it's bad storyboard. So I'll look at it and see the impression of what they want. And then as we do in long form, I'll help the director get what they need and then make suggestions accordingly. Ninja suggestions. I can
That's great. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that that's the case, because the few commercials that I've done, they were so rigid. Like, this is the board, this is what we're shooting, axis crosses be damned, all of that, right? So I'm glad to hear there's because you've done way more.
You have to be brave and speak up that that things are the way they are. They've already done their prep, but oftentimes there will be glaring mistakes that nobody's addressed, but we know. And so we have to be brave enough to speak up. And when we're shooting, we're kind of like a compass shooting north. If we veer off, we have to have the chutzpah to stand up and say, excuse me, stop. And that I've been fortunate enough to get away with that. I said, I'm kind of like the referee on a football match, that I just follow along and everything's okay. But as soon as I see problems, as soon as somebody does a foul, I stand up and throw the flag and everybody boos at me. But at the end, it's all okay.
I love that analogy. Oh, this is my favorite question always. I ask everyone this who has had a career in film. Do you have any favorite moments in your commercial career that you want to talk about where you knew that you were doing the exact job you were supposed to be doing?
I mean, I've done thousands of commercials, so I've had lots of good moments. So they are with the directors, and then they are with the spot also, troubleshooting, timing or an edit or blocking that coming into the rescue to save the day. So these are just two, but they're an example of, the first one was an IKEA commercial, which was 24 seconds long. But in that 24 seconds for the product, we had to show every little bit. But for the director, he had a story. He chose a Nona. He was walking on College Street and saw a grandmother, a little Nona, and said, hey, you want to be in a commercial? And he cast her right then and there. So she had never set foot on set, let alone knew how to work with a camera, what a mark was, or to do anything. And this commercial was really particular on what mark you had to hit at one point. But it's a good example of knowing the edit, understanding timing, understanding beats, understanding how you can tighten an edit just enough to make everything fit in 24 seconds. So that's a big deal in the commercial world, because if you go over and the editor can't cut it down, you get a phone call, you don't get hired back. So it's an example of timing and story together for a product.
Tutti fuori. Kitchens that can handle everything and everyone. The IKEA kitchen event is on now.
Wow, wonderful. Wow, there's like continuity, but you also got to understand jump cuts and time cuts. And it was 24 seconds because of the 6-second like logo at the end with voiceover, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't realize when they're breaking down a script, if they've never done a spot before, they don't realize, well, you always got to ask, like, is there a product shot or a logo at the end? How long is that? And then what are we aiming for in our timing budget? So that's a really clear, good example with like 15 edits. That was a lot of work. Good.
A lot of work. It's fun.
And let's talk about the second clip you sent me.
It's an example how and it's also, these two commercials are recent, that I have a whole wealth of spots that at some point, some of you may see that give examples of different kinds of films, but this one is an example that we do tell story. And there was a lot of visual effects. So it was the storytelling and also having to work with a visual effects supervisor to do all the layering and all the pieces that we needed. So.
Hey, buddy, I'm here. What are you doing up so late?
I had a bad dream.
Oh, no, again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the same one from last night.
Well, it's a good thing you're the bravest kid I know.
Thanks, Mom.
Try to get some sleep now, okay, honey?
Okay. Mom,
Yeah, baby.
when are you coming back?
First thing tomorrow morning. I promise.
But why can't you be here now?
It just gets me every time. Really, really good work, Celine. That's a lot of layering, and I imagine there was a lot of prep involved in that. Yeah, great. Sorry, it makes me cry.
Right.
It's really good work.
And with a director and a production house that know me and know who I am, and so really involve me and ask me what I think would be the best way to do this, or what else do we need, and a visual effects supervisor who I work closely with. And he and I will often bandy together. We need to get this when production, when the agent's going, no, let's move on, that kind of thing. So it's fun.
I love that. I love working closely with VFX supervisors. It's great, as you can see, because you can get effects like that. You can get results like that. Let's talk about the new world of script supervising, because you've been able to do a lot of remote script supervision lately. Do you want to tell us about that? A lot of people haven't done it yet.
Right. When the lockdown happened, and I then at that point joined Script Supervisors, ! There was a girl in London who said, hey, I just did my first remote commercial. This is how I did it. And she had a list of how she set it up. So I took her template and made it my own, but made it way bigger and way more functional, way more interactive with everybody. So I did about 30 days that were successful and worked well. You're tight with the video, the VTR person to set everything up so that you're streaming and can do that, you're streaming properly. But it's like being a fly on the wall, because you can be with the director. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of concentrated work. Craft absolutely sucks. Barely get time to have a drink. You have all these monitors, and you can be with the director, you can be with the agency, the creatives, you can be with the client and the agency. And then I'm in touch with every department on set. So it's way more involved and way more practical, but I'm the only one who wasn't on set in the crew. And I think eventually that didn't fly. Pun intended.
Was that your choice, or did they say a script can stay at home?
No, that was my saying, I can work from home. They said, no, you can't. And I said, yes, I can. Let me tell you how. And so I would talk to producers, and I would lay out everything, and I would check with VTR to ensure that VTR could give me everything that I needed. And the guys, the people I know are savvy, they're all guys. And so they would help me and we would do it. But it took convincing the producer, oftentimes the director, that I could do it. And I did it, and it worked well. But as I say, that when the producer's on set and they're exterior in the snow and they see me sitting at home, la, la, la. Quite honestly, I think they get a little bit pissed off and they say, I want script on set next time, when I don't really need to be.
But I remember on commercial sets, always running between the director, the agency, and the client for their notes. Did you find that easier or harder remotely?
Easier. So I could just with a press of a button go from the two different rooms, or three different rooms, with the client agency, with the creative agency, and on set with the director, like literally here, there. I didn't have to get up or walk anywhere, and I was dry. I didn't have to balance anything on a knee. once I was set up. The setup took a little bit, but I didn't have to move a cable once I was set up, right? So it was, I loved it and would love to do it, but that it's just too much of an unknown factor, and not enough people have done it. And the script supervisors that I've talked to prefer to be on set. So,
but once again, the more, if we don't ask, we don't get, right?
Exactly.
That's kind of wonderful. So if you had any advice for someone brand new getting into commercials today, and we know there's been a whole evolution in technology and in working styles, like you said, like I didn't know about the 4 agency versus like the 1 strong agency producer in the past. But if you had, what would you tell someone brand new starting today?
Right. To take my course.
Yes.
It's difficult. The producers have a really tight rein on the head count on set. So even before COVID, it was hard to get another body on set to shadow. That being said, pre-COVID and even now, if you did an exterior shoot and had enough space, you could invite somebody to observe from a distance, and that would give you an opportunity to introduce them to the director, the producer, and the PM. So that's the way that I would do it now. I'd saddle up to some script supervisor, and or start making cold calls to production managers with your resume. The challenge with this is that everybody's always so veiled. It's hard to get a number. So just find a script supervisor who will give you PM numbers and cold call, or find a way to join somebody on set to meet the director, the producer, and the PM.
Oh, wow. It's even harder now than when I was in that commercial world. I used to tell everybody the same thing I used to tell them in long form is like, tell everybody, knock on every door, walk into every production company, but you can't really do that anymore. So you did hint at your course. I'm dying to, so for those, I know it's still not released yet, but what can you tell us about this course you have coming? Because I'm so excited about it.
It's a course for seasoned script supervisors who want to make a permanent move into commercials but don't know the commercial world very well. And it's for new script supervisors who have taken a script supervisor's course, like Danielle's, and who want to start their career in commercials. So it's for both. That, as I've said, that it took me 30 years to navigate a film set. And I now know it. I've deconstructed my knowledge and have painted a way to avoid that learning curve. So a shortcut to commercials. It's going to be similarities and differences between commercials and long form, which are vast, the practices or politics of set, how to book a gig and juggle overlapping calls, because this happens a lot. There's a whole system of getting called and booked and so on, how to be helpful to commercial actors, the politics surrounding the agency and client, the language of commercials, our unique relationship with all departments, prep, production, and wrap, breaking down schedules, scripts, storyboards, and pre-visualizations, our responsibilities for visual effects, editorial variations for multiple spots on multiple platforms and different aspect ratios. It's a big one these days. And deliverables. So deliverables and how to troubleshoot and prep in prep. And then when you walk on set and things are just completely different. So how to get to that and how to set up to work remotely. So those are the topics generally.
Great. Yes, that's a full career training right there for that world. That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that everyone who is at this, and also everyone I can tell, will know when Celine is releasing that, and Celine will, I'm sure, also help you make sure. But I know several of the director whisperers who have asked me about commercials, who I'm sure would love to find out more when it's released. Okay, so that's great. I would like to open up the floor to any questions. I didn't see, I saw some, I saw some fun comments about how powerful the spots was. Double wow, such different stories, both so brilliantly told. Robin in Texas, she says this often, a closed mouth does not get fed. And Karen says it's amazing. And Ray, I'm super excited for that. Yay. Does anyone have any, I'm sure people have a ton of questions. And if not, I can come up with some. Hello. What is the usual length of a shoot for a 30-second spot?
A quarter of a day. Sometimes we'll shoot. I've been on shows where we've shot 10 spots in a day, or 2 days for a 30-second spot. So it really depends on the budget, who the director is, what the product is, and what the story is. Variable.
I want to, you probably have stories like this, Celine, but my shortest and longest day on set ever were both on commercials. I had a 3.5-hour day for a Mott's Clamato commercial and a 23-hour day on a Super Bowl commercial in 1994. It was like the Star Trek one. I can't remember the product, but so the longest and shortest, you never know what you're going to get generally, right?
And the Super Bowl spots are the creme de la creme of the spots to work on for the year. However bad we may think they are, they're really big budget commercials. So that doesn't surprise me, 23 hours.
And we, by the way, they asked me to hire an assistant on that. So they paid my assistant full rate. So we had 2 script supervisors because they were nervous about this was 1994. They were nervous about all the scripted dialogue in that spot. It was a 1-minute spot, I think. I was laughing. I'm like, we do not need 2 assistants. So after I did my first day and it was 23 hours, I let Oliver, my assistant, take over day 2. I was like, you don't need 2 scripts.
That one of the biggest differences between long form and commercials is that a commercial advertising director will be stumped shooting 28 seconds in a day, when we've just come from a show where we've literally been shooting 10 pages a day. It's incredulous. So that's part of the challenge and the practice of dispensing of that. This is a different world now. How do we support this director in his 28 seconds?
It's amazing, right? Okay. Ray asks, Sophie asks, do you know if this varies a lot in the UK? Oh, in terms of shooting times, Sophie, or everything? I guess, does this vary in the UK? I think not.
If it's a Canadian or American production, that we don't abide by their nice rules, the way that they shoot in an 8-hour day in Paris, or days are shorter in the UK. So if we barge in, that we pretty much standardize things to our overworked way.
Oh, that's different in long form. In long form, at least the ones I've done in Europe, they've conformed because crews would just refuse to work for a full month, longer than 8 to 10 hours. But in commercials, because you're doing shorter shoots, maybe I can see how that would be the case for sure. Ray, this may be a silly question, but how are the various shots done on the Ronald McDonald commercial? Did the ship shots and space shots exist in some form before the onset day, or was it all green screen?
We did everything. So we literally went out onto Lake Ontario and created waves and shot that part. We did some visual effects for, I don't even know if we did. We had a really shitty night that night, so it was pretty much all in camera. And the visual effects we did in studio. So we layered and set up and layered it all.
Oh, wow.
Is that a question?
I don't know how much experience Ray has had on visual effects. That's why I don't know. It's not a silly question by any means, Ray. But yeah, often we shoot the actors on green screen first, and then they match it all. And then sometimes there's a whole separate crew shooting the elements, and sometimes main unit does it. So it sounds like you guys did it all. Do you remember how long that shoot was?
1 day in studio and 1 day for the story, for the little boy and for the mom.
So good. Wow. I'm sure that's won a number of awards, right? That's the other thing about commercials. They're so into these, like they get a lot of awards. It's hard to keep up with who's won what. Rosvita in LA. I recently worked on a commercial shoot that will end up being several commercials, possibly 6 or more. How would you include that on a CV, as one or as more?
Unfortunately, is one that today, with us shooting one commercial or one product, I worked on a shoot where we had 24 deliverables. So those would be considered deliverables, and they're all different spots, but it's only one spot on our timesheet.
On our timesheet, but on a CV also, right?
You could say that it was one spot, but we did. And so, yeah, you could break it down, because that means more work for us when we have that many deliverables, that we did a 30-second, a 15, a 6, then we did stuff for TikTok, for Instagram, English, French, Spanish, that you could put all that as a subsection of that one commercial.
Oh my God. The last commercial I did was pre-Instagram. Isn't that crazy? So I'm glad you said all that. I used to write, if we did multiple languages, I would put that. I didn't really have a commercial CV, but I'd keep track on a separate sheet, and it would say like English and French versions if we had multiple languages, mainly to show that we work bilingually, really. Yeah. Ray, following on that, how did you coordinate all that? So that was about the Ronald McDonald House shoot. If you couldn't even see the final shot. Oh, that's part of the course, right, Celine? Yeah, it's in my course, and I know it's in Celine's course. It's critical to understand and train on how to work with your visual effects supervisor and how to understand all the layers you have to understand. But basically, we take a lot of notes and we talk to the VFX supervisor, so they we understand what they're trying to achieve, and then we figure out what we need to do to track that. So obviously, tracking lens sizes, tilt, and all kinds of measurements that the VFX person gives us is one way, but there's so many aspects to it.
Yeah, there's so many different layers that we have to shoot, that's why we're good as a group, because we can all think. So what the visual effects person didn't think about, because the shot changed a little bit, that we can pipe up and say, we still need to get this to cover ourselves for that, and so on and so forth. So between the director, the AD, the DP, and visual effects, we do work closely together to ensure that we have everything that they need in visual effects, that they don't have to come out the next day to reshoot something. But if they do, they have the lens and the height and the inclination, because we've written that down.
It's so funny because, as we, the director whispers learn how to edit in their head, as we've learned to edit in our head on the fly, we have to do the same with being able to visualize visual effects. And sometimes we're the only second set of eyes for the VFX producer. So we're so critical to them in that, like, oh, aren't you missing the element with the smoke? Like, is that post, or we're all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun.
So it's fun, and it's a very learnable skill, Ray. You can learn it in Celine's program, in my program, and also on set, just by like really talking to your VFX your VFX supervisor, and asking them. They love, don't you find, Celine? They love talking about their job.
Yeah, and also these days with YouTube, that you can pretty much Google any show, any movie, visual effects, and just see how did they make the making up, and you'll get a breakdown from the visual effects department. So that's fun.
Yes, the before and after, when they show like inset on green screen, and then the final. I love that. Robin in Texas, have you ever worked in the US, and what is the difference as far as politics and protocol?
I haven't worked in the US. No, they don't. No.
But it's the same, because we've worked with plenty of US directors.
Yeah, I mainly work with, I try to stay with the Canadian people, but it's the same. It's exactly the same. The difference that I hear, that the food is sometimes better, the weather is warmer, and that's about it.
I hear that about British Columbia, that they have much better food over there.
And a big difference between long form and commercials, that on commercials, we have amazing chefs that have come into catering, and we have great craft service. So when I think about long form, that we have better food.
Yeah. That is 100% for sure. I always dress up on commercials, which, unless we're shooting like out in the woods or something, or like you said, out on the lake. But I find I always wear my nicest dresses on commercials, because the agency people are going to be dressed up, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's a more corporate feel. It doesn't have to be, but it can be a more corporate feel overall. Oh, and by the way, yeah, because we work with US directors and DOPs, I got to work with Dean Cundy, who is like the DOP of the Jurassic. You probably work, he's a great commercial DOP, and his daughter is a script supervisor in the US. You know that it's the exact same system because it's everything just, you just know from, because it's just like with long form, all the US shows that shoot here follow a similar protocol. Vita, thank you for the difference between commercials and deliverables. That will help with the CV. 1 commercial, 6 deliverables. Yes. And put the languages, Rosvita, if you did languages. APA, oh, Emma, APA recommended crew terms. Oh, is that, Emma, is that for the UK or the US? That looks like a great resource. Thank you for, Emma posted a PDF in the chat. APA, underline recommended, underline crew, underline terms, underline July, underline 2021.pdf. Rosvita says, I love the VFX aspect. It's like playing multi-layer chess, right? I love that too. It's the vertical component added to the horizontal time one. Emma, hi everyone. In the UK. Okay, so great. Thank you for answering that. Hi everyone. In the UK, the Advertising Producers Association give crew rates, terms of agreement. It's a 13-page PDF for all crew to download. Thank you so much for that, Emma. In Canada, it's the ACCP. They go into great detail online on the terms. So in certain parts of Canada, commercials are non-union. They're not covered by a union in most parts of Canada, but in the US, it can vary wildly by region. So you kind of have to know which one you're working. Do you have to be, so just to give people an overview, IATSE used to cover commercials in Ontario until 1988, I want to say. I remember the strike. In 1988 was the first year, or maybe it was 89. It was the first year that I worked in the film business, just as a production secretary at a commercial house. And there were huge pickets like next door. And that's when IATSE lost the bargaining rights for commercials in Ontario. So in Ontario, commercials are non-union, but the rates, I'm sure Celine will agree, are much better, right, Celine? The rates, and I mean, we lose the fringes, but I think you guys are treated pretty well on a payment level.
And there's one production house that's trying to change that to give us benefits and a pension. So they're considering that. So there's a possibility that may change in the future.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Oh, that's great news. Cheers, Emma. Yes, thanks, Emma. Thank you, Emma. That's huge. That's huge because we have people here from all over the world. So this is great. Tracy, I'm very new at script supervising, have worked on 1 short film as an assistant. Oh, well, good. Assistantships are hard to come by. Well, easier to come by in the UK. Most of my UK director whisperers got assistant jobs right away, but it's harder over here. And 1 low budget feature by young directors for free, struggling to know how to get started. Any ideas and advice? And yes, to take the class.
You can apply for internship. That the commercial production houses here now have internship programs because of the climate that we're in, or get a production assistant job on a commercial. And then once you're on set, then get to the script supervisor, get to know who's who, and work your way from there. That's an option also.
And there's a whole industry in corporate video, which we didn't touch on that today, but sometimes you're in a city that doesn't have a commercial industry, but they definitely have like a corporate video industry, which means there's, like, for example, in Toronto, there's Canadian Tire. I had a friend who produced and directed 300 commercials a year for in-house for Canadian, not commercials, corporate videos for Canadian Tire. And it parlayed into his regular directing career. So the difference is, think of where you are. So if you're in Virginia, is there a big company or any government? Virginia might have government agencies, right? Corporate videos are usually 8 hours a day. They don't pay nearly as great as commercial videos, but they pay, enough. Like back in the day, in the 80s when I did, in the 90s, sorry, I'm not that, in the early 90s, it was like $250 a day for an 8-hour day.
When I think of industrial videos to break into the industry, I've certainly cut my teeth on industrial videos. That watching TV, and it's Merck Pharmaceutical who's doing a reenactment of the couple who were doing the drugs for whatever. Go to Merck and see if Merck has an advertising department and put your resume in with them. And that goes for a lot of commercials, for Best Buy, that much the way that Canadian Tire has an in-house Best Buy may also, those types of places that are international. Walmart does commercials. We usually do commercials, but I bet they have an in-house industrial video section within. So that's sort of a creative way to find work.
And listen, that does involve a little bit of hustle in terms of researching, like, cold calling and cold emailing and saying, hey, do you have a corporate video? You can just Google corporate video, Virginia. You were saying they don't really have a commercial industry. In California, I was told if you're in Northern California, San Francisco has a huge commercial. It's mostly commercials there, is what one director told me. Katya says, I'm in New Zealand, and from what I've heard, it's only really big international commercials that have script supervisors on. Katya, that may be the case, but you can change that. For example, in Toronto, and I'm sure Celine remembers this, there was a time when they wouldn't bring us on for MOS commercials, but now they do. They started to see the value in us being on commercials without dialogue, right?
So yes, it's not only big budget commercials that I've worked on, really low budget commercials that haven't had much comfort at all. So they exist. By
the way, is there still a busy season? It used to be September, October for Christmas. Has that changed?
It's all year round.
It's all year round because of the web. Because of web, I ended up doing like food spots for the web. I remember where they would still pay the CPAT rates back then, but it was like 1 minute and 8 seconds for how to make a pizza or whatever, right?
It depends. November, if you have American directors on your roster, is slow for America because of Thanksgiving. But if you're working with Canadian directors, nothing skips a beat.
Stephanie, do you think having a background in long form is necessary to do well as a commercial script supervisor? Great question.
No. If you understand filmmaking and you do your homework and learn the edit and learn filmmaking, it's the same thing. It's just reduced down to seconds, it often. So no, you don't need to have for example, actors. I'll use an actor example, that in film, an actor has time to take a breath and talk, can think about the character. In commercials, that same actor is acting on the head of a pin, that all that has to be done in that short of a time. So understanding long form, especially how to reduce and edit, how to do time cuts, is helpful. Understanding filmmaking, and that's where we fall short with script supervisors in commercials. They don't understand the edit. They don't understand filmmaking. They don't know how to flag a problem, or don't have the confidence to stand up and say, we are crossing the axis here. It's not a problem as long as you understand what an axis is. Are you doing it for effect? Or do you want the audience to feel a little unsettled? There is no right and wrong, and the 1950s rule book is great to read, but you have to watch films and figure that out yourself. So no, you don't need a long form background. It's helpful, but just being enthusiastic about film is helpful. So watching a movie without sound so that you can just see the visual image and the edit without being distracted by the music and everything will show you the edit. So you can take that information and go on to a commercial set.
Oh, yes. And like understanding film grammar and artistry is so important also in that director whispering, because like, as you know, like commercial directors are even bigger geeks about film than I find than even long form directors. Film and like technique, because think about David Fincher started out in commercials and music videos. So he is like a super geek of technique and style. And so you got to be able to converse with them on that level. So it behooves all of you, whether you're going directly into commercials or going via long form, it behooves every single person to understand the director's language and the visual language of cinema. And also, just to do our job on a basic editing level. Makes sense, says Stephanie. Thank you. Robin asks, is the wrap time for commercials similar to long form?
When wrap is called, I usually book a half hour, or find a way to make it a half hour, but I can leave set when wrap is called. Now with everything being digital, I'm out the door as the AD is saying P on wrap.
Do you use one of the like Scarrett or a Scripty or your own system or pen and paper?
A little bit of everything. I use scriptation and scriptation, a little bit of written notes, a little bit of scanning, a little bit of everything, and piece it together. So I don't have to be on set for rap. I can do it in the taxi on the way home. Yeah. But there really isn't much rap. That at most rap is 10 minutes. So where you decide to do that is up to you. So rap is amazing. After doing long form, when I think about having to do the line script and the DPR at the end of the night, I absolutely shudder that in commercials, when rap is called, 10 minutes and I'm gone. And the next morning I forget what I worked on. So I'm present for the day, but it doesn't carry over. It's like one day if I want it to be, or we can choose what we want to do. And you don't have to live it and breathe it for weeks and months.
I'm sure Robin is like super stoked to hear that, as a lot of us are. Katya in New Zealand has a question. What paperwork do you hand in?
The script. So I'll break down the script the way that I do in long form. And if there's a lot of dialogue, I will do a line script. Sometimes I'll call the editor and ask them if they know what a line script is.
Yes.
And often they don't. So I don't, but I will still for me, because it's my way of keeping track of the lines that we've got on what slate and so on. So the boards with the slate number for each panel of the boards and a timing and any notes that the director has. One of the, I think, more in commercials that we need to pay attention to everything that's going on, to the little dialogue that the director's having with the agency, and to be listening to everything, to take notes. That's a big part of our job also, is taking more detailed notes, but we do it in between a joke and a coffee and laughter, unlike long form where it's so intense.
Such an onslaught. So it's closer to the UK system of paperwork where you have like the slate sheet. So one slate sheet per setup, right?
Okay, sorry. So thanks, Daniela. I'm not good at doing that. Yeah. So one sheet per slate per setup, and accounting for multiple cameras. So that I hand into the editor with the boards and with the script. And sometimes just the notes, the boards, yes, and not even the script.
Yes. I was exactly the same coming from long form. That's how I would do it. But like Celine said, I keep saying the politics, but the notes from the agents, it's very important for the editor to know who the note came from. So if it was from the agency producer, I put an AP, or if it's from the director, because sometimes they're not going to agree, right, Celine? And it's like, are we doing the director's cut? Are we doing the client cut or the agency cut? Our notes get so detailed. And how do you handle, I'm sure you handle it the same way I do, when they just keep rolling multiple passes? I call them passes.
Yeah. I go by time code. And I always sit just a few inches behind the director so I can see their expressions. And when it's a favorable expression, I note the time code. So if a take is running 10 minutes long, I do the time code. In commercials, I'm not even doing slates anymore.
Oh,
I'm just doing time code. We don't need it. So I'm trying to train people that we don't need to do a slate because it's time consuming, that we just need to see the time code. And as long as everything is sunk up with the camera, we're fine for the sound editor, for the picture editor to do everything. But it's important to note when we're doing a 10-minute take where the sweet spot, which take was good, and where the sweet spot was within that 1 second shot. So it gets really, really, really detailed. And so I make tons of notes, like Daniela said, what the director said, what the agency producer said, what we didn't get. And I make a note what was out of focus to cover the focus pullers, but so that because things go really fast and communication is so fast, that I make detailed notes to cover the crew, to cover the DP, that he didn't like that pan, the focus puller was out of focus, they didn't get the dialogue. So it's detailed notes and keeping track of, what was the question? But keeping track of the clip numbers, camera roll, clip numbers, if it's a long take, the time code within that clip.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that, because Rosvita did her first commercial and she asked me this question. She said, am I writing down too much? She's writing down the clip number and the time code because she had an AC who refused to slate anything. So what you're saying is that is becoming more normal now, and what she did was correct. Because I said, you're doing so much work, but she got a big thank you from the editor. So
yeah. So we don't need the slate because things change so much that we'd be slating quite often, as long as you have the camera roll, the clip number, and I only do time code notations when I see something is flagged by the director or when a version comes up, so that I have a baseline that I can ask VTR to play back camera roll alpha 2 at clip 4 at time code 10:18:21, so that we can get to it quick. And that's always impressive on set, when we have that information, to give that information quickly rather than searching for a needle in a haystack. So if you did that, that was right. It is a lot of work, but you find a way to do a shorthand of it and to do it faster and to be able to prioritize when you need to do every last detail or just broad strokes and certain things. So it's by experience.
I need to take your class, Celine, because that was new to me. But Rosvita says, Celine, your description is exactly how it has been going on these. And when she says these commercials, she means lower budget LA, although she is getting a really good rate for a lower budget LA commercial. That Rosvita, I'm talking to Rosvita directly because she's discovered commercials like very early in her career. And I'm curious, Rosvita, if you will ever now do long form, if you've fallen in love, because I can fully understand this. I had a student in the 90s who took my program, discovered commercials, and decided to be forever a commercial person because she was a visual artist and she wanted to spend as much time possible painting and just wanted a job that supported her painting. So I can see the beauty. I do want to ask you what's next for you, Celine, because you are also a director. Are you thinking about that or and what's your next thing? I mean, the course is going to be huge.
The course is going to be huge, and I'll continue with Brad Fraser and do the old movies for young people series. So that is there, and a few other things that are in the bubbling stages.
I imagine that what's going to happen for your course is probably the same thing that happened with Director Whisper, that your alumni will start to help each other in different regions around the world with like covering each other for work or networking with each other. I find that's one of the most beautiful things that happens with the community of people who took my course. And I'm sure it will be the same for you. I imagine you'll hit even more countries than my course will. I imagine.
And that's something that we don't have in commercials. We don't have that community, that we don't work in the same way. We have different backgrounds. We come with different talents to the table. We don't communicate. It's very closed and held close to your chest. We can't get people. Anyways, it's not, I want commercials to operate similarly to long form in terms of being a cohesive unit, talking to each other, covering for each other, communicating. We don't have that yet.
Yes, because that's the other byproduct of communication is our rates go up. So all our non-union script supervisors in Ontario and in BC, for example, agreed. They got together in the Director Whisperer and said, we're not going to work for less than this. And they got that. For the most part, got that. So, okay. In your course, Celine, says Tracy, will you go over electronic script supervision softwares and which are best? The course I took originally taught hard copy and paper.
Right. I'm a little bit of both. That I've done the course for Script D. The commercial section of that is an addendum, and you have to go through a lot of information to get to that. I think scriptation is the quickest and least expensive and fastest way to do things on set. So if it comes to pure digital, I'll have to hand that off to. Well, no, I could probably do that too. I just don't do it on set because I don't have a desk always to have a computer and an iPad. I want two things to work with. And I don't like swiping. And when a director asks me a question, I want to have the answer right there. And I can do that quicker with pen and paper.
Yeah. And I'm sure what's going to happen as you release your course is the same thing with me. I train people in a digital workflow, but I don't train them on specific software because I want people. I teach the concept of the paper workflow, and I teach a specific workflow involving Neo Office, which is a free to $10 a year shareware program, because I don't want to say Scripty or Scarrett. They're both great, but I don't use either of them. I can see why my students sometimes use them and think they're great, but there's not one way to be a script supervisor. There's not one way to be a commercial script, but you can listen to the advice of very veteran people and do it your own way. But for software, go to the experts. Like I send my students to Anthony directly, like go learn Scripty with Anthony, go learn Scarrett with Scarrett, but I can teach you the concepts of what the forms are supposed to look like. And I'm sure Celine will end up doing some version of that because you've done it all, right?
Yeah, exactly. That I'm not big on being completely digital for a few reasons.
And Meryl asks, will the course be live in Toronto or online somewhere? She's in Vancouver.
Right. I'll come to Vancouver and teach just me. It'll be online. It'll be online. There'll be webinars and live Zoom sessions and Q&A sessions and a support base group page and me.
You're going to find it's going to be great. It's going to be great. Celine's also in our Director Whisper alumni community if you want to tap her brain for stuff, but she's going to soon have her own commercial community. So it's going to be fantastic. Rosvita says, I found learning how to do it on paper first was the best grounding possible. I agree, because you got to know how to do the job first. You got to know how to do the job if all the power goes out, which by the way, literally happened to Ryan, one of my students. Thank you for your time, Celine. I'm so excited for your course. Thank you, everybody. And looking forward to sharing whatever information we can get from Celine when she's ready to launch. Fantastic, Celine. See you later.
Thanks, guys. Nice to be here.
Oh, and if you are watching this on my YouTube channel, please do consider liking and subscribing below. It will help me continue making videos like this. My channel is all about script supervision, comedy, screenwriting, and entrepreneurship, which is, I know, those are all the things I geek out about. Love you, Celine. Bye.
Thanks for coming.